in private practice in downtown Boston. He has recently started to bring what he knows about motivation. So I was particularly interested in having you all hear about his approach to motivation, which uses the cognitive, you correct me if I'm wrong, uses the cognitive behavioral approach to raise your awareness and your mindfulness about your own thoughts. And the idea is that if you are more aware of your thoughts, you can more effectively address the beliefs you're carrying around and the behaviors that are getting in your way to achieving your goals, whether they're academic or professional. Okay, so I thought that was a really interesting approach and was really eager to expose the Newbury community to it. So please welcome Dr. Marshawn Glover.
Anybody have a good time first time on the tee? If you had a good time on the tee the first time, you chant like this.
When I was
It was exciting. You were like, woohoo! Chant like this. Okay. And if your experience was the opposite, you were terrified, kind of shaky, chant like this. Okay. So there are a lot of in here that are like me when I had my first experience. It wasn't woohoo! I was terrified. So I first took the tee in, the summer of 2003. So I was here for a summer research program at Harvard. And so I was coming into my senior year in undergrad. And so I'm from Columbus, Georgia, and it's a rural, southern town right next to the Army base. And so up to that point, I had never been on any kind of public transportation, really any kind of bus. I mean, there was a bus that drove you from one side of the base to the other side of the base. And it wasn't very intricate. It wasn't very scary. It was just one straight shot. There were like 5 places you can go. 5 places you can go. And so I get here to Boston for the summer, and I was here with a group of students, and they were thinking, they had this grand idea that we would get out and we would explore Boston for the summer. And I said, okay, that's a great idea. Let's just take a taxi. That was what I was thinking. And so, you figure in the cost, and I was like, maybe we shouldn't take a taxi. The T will take you everywhere you need to go. That's what they told us. So I said, okay, great. So how do I know where to go, or like which direction to go? So a group of us, decided one weekend to go out, and there was just one guy that was with the group, and he walks up to, how there's the diagram that tells you what all the stops are and the direction to go. This one guy goes up, and he didn't really seem sure of himself when he was looking at it. He was like, well, I think we want to go to Copley. Yeah, let's just go that way, go inbound, let's see what happens. What do you mean, see what happens? I mean, you need to be sure. Like, I don't know where I'm going. And I was terrified. I said, come on, man, look, are you sure you just go that way? He said, oh yeah, it'll be fine, don't worry about it. He said, don't worry about it. So that's the wrong thing to say to a person who's nervous about it. So he said, don't worry about it. I said, okay, all right. So I had a decision to make in that moment. Was I gonna go back home, well, it wasn't home, to the dorm for the summer, and watch tennis, or something that was on TV, or was I gonna take the risk of possibly getting lost with this group and possibly having a great time? So I had to make that decision. So I said, all right, well, no time like the present. So I get on the tee, and it's tight, smells weird, it's lots of people on there, and so I'm trying to stand where I'm not really touching anybody, and I still don't know what's going on. Everything was just moving fast. And so I'm looking around. I noticed that there are diagrams on the train. I said, oh, okay, well, there's diagrams. Maybe I can figure this out. So I see what stop we are, and I see it on the map. I say, okay, that's one stop. And if I'm right about this, the next stop is going to be the one on the map. And so when that happened, I was actually kind of laughing to myself inside. I was like, because that was kind of too easy. Like once I got on there, figured out what was going on, it was kind of easy. And so how could I almost risk not going out into Boston, learning the city, because I was afraid that I would get lost on the train. I was afraid that I wouldn't know where to go. And back then, I didn't have a cell phone. I felt like I was probably like the last person to have a cell phone in 2003, but I didn't have a cell phone. So if we got lost, that was it. And so I thought about it later. That experience made me think about how there are times in our lives where what's coming, what we're doing now is so uncertain that we just have to take a risk and go with it. And so that's what traveling on the T was like the first time for me. It was this really revealing experience of taking a risk. You don't know what's going to happen. And it's possible that what you're worried about is just something that you're worried about. So that was my scary experience. How are you guys doing today? You guys can talk. I'm going to talk to you. Talk to me. How are you doing today?
Good.
Anybody bad that they're here today? Wanted to be a bigger snowstorm than they predicted? It was funny. Okay, I'm glad that you're honest, because I looked out the window today and I was like, hey, where's my 12 inches of snow? It wasn't even dust on the ground when I looked out the window this morning. So anyway, I'm glad to be here with you today. I wanted to thank Susie. You guys can you join me in thanking her? Clap your hands for her for bringing me here to be the contact person and helping me get everything that I needed to do this talk today. I'm excited to be here today because there are really three things I want to accomplish. The first thing is to encourage you. So this time of the year, have you guys been on spring break yet? Okay, all right, so you're post-spring break, you're at the start of spring, it's still cold. You probably need a little encouragement to get through that last little bit so you can have some fun during the summer. Or if you're not having any fun, start a new internship or externship, whatever it may be. But I'm here to encourage you, not just for that, but that at this time in your life, you're at a very critical point where you're trying to realize dreams, trying to figure things out, and there's lots of uncertainty ahead, like going forward. So I'm here to encourage you that there are ways to think about dealing with that uncertainty so you can push past any obstacle you might face going forward. The second thing I'm here to do is to educate you about a process that you can use to get past any obstacles. I like to think of it as kind of like a skeleton key. Everybody know what a skeleton key is? It's a key you can use to open really any door in the house. I don't know if they still make those, but basically it's a key that you can use, or it's a tool that you can use in many different situations to push past an obstacle that you find yourself in because of what it is you think and believe. And the last thing I'm here to do today is to entertain you. So I don't mean I'm gonna sing or dance or tell jokes, or maybe I have a joke or two, but I'm really here to entertain you, I guess a better word for it is to entrap. I'm here to entrap your mind, your curiosity, to think about your future in a different way. And if you are having a hard time meeting goals or figuring out what you want to do, then this is a way that you can break through that stumbling block right now. So, three things I want to do: encourage you, educate you, entertain you. Is that okay for me to do? Can I have permission? Okay, because if you're going to say no, I was going to do it anyway, so why don't we just get started, okay? My job is interesting. I love what I do. For about 25, 30 hours a week, I get to sit in front of people who struggle with some kind of, what we call it, anxiety. So people who worry excessively, people who suffer panic attacks, people who have performance anxiety. They have things that they want to do, but they're just so afraid. They've been treated phobia. And what I like most about treating that population is every time I'm talking to someone, every time we talk about what it is they believe that explains their anxiety, I can kind of understand the narrative, because some of the time I think that same way. Do I get anxious? Yes. Do I let fear, anxiety stop me? Yes, also. But I've become much better at recognizing when it's happening and then using the skills that I've learned personally and professionally to be able to push through them. So if I find myself stumbling or not doing what I believe I should be doing, then I know exactly where to look to move past it. And for me, it's in my fear. It's in the fear of failing. It's in the fear of what it will be required of me when I reach the other side of success. And it's almost like a fear. It's a thought that's almost taunting sometimes, saying, you could do this, you could be great if you just did X, but you're not going to because you're so scared. And so when that thought is happening in me, I know exactly what to go to be able to get past it. So what I want to do today is talk a little bit about some of the experiences I've had and some of the experiences that I've had in helping other people. And in those stories, you can see what the process is for being able to move past any obstacle that you might have. My main message today is that, the main message is ideas between your ears will create a roadblock for you or the highway on your path to success. Okay? So before we get into this, we need to start with understanding fear and worry. So there is a difference. Worry can be thought about as doubt about the future or a future outcome or an event. And fear is much more, I tend to think of it as something that's much more present, in the moment, focused. You can definitely worry about the future and not feel very certain about how things are going to work out, but it doesn't have the same quality of destabilizing intensity that fear might have in the moment. And so fear is it's the kind of fear that causes you to be paralyzed, panicked, not able to move. And so how you deal with how you deal with that moment is going to be very important here. We need to also talk about what we call the difference between irrational fear and worry and rational fear. So I have an example for you. So irrational fears, they take on many different forms. So where you find these kinds of fears the most is when we're talking about performance and the consequences of not performing up to your expectations or other people's expectations. Those might be affecting your ability to take action and go forward. This is an example from someone that, actually this is one that comes up very often with students. And so we're talking about fear. This student, these groups of students were very worried about their futures. And so we talked about that. And so the first thought is, I don't understand the material for this particular class. And press them on it and say, well, what does that mean? Or why is that such a big issue? If I don't understand the material, it means that I won't do well, my GPA will suffer. And what will happen if that happens? Then I won't get into graduate school or get a job after college. And then what? And then I won't have the job or I won't have the life that I want. And then my parents will reject me. And then I'll be a failure. So it spirals very quickly. So we're going from I don't understand the material to I'm going to be a failure. Has anybody, you don't have to say if that's been you, but have you ever had sort of this worry spiral where it starts out as something very, it's possible that you might not do well on the exam because you don't understand the material, but to end up at possibly becoming a failure because of that? Anybody ever struggle with it? So I've definitely been there. So this same summer that I was talking about where I rode the T for the first time, yay! I was here for the summer, and I was excited. So you have to imagine for a second, I'm from South Georgia, and I actually didn't even know where Harvard was when I came for that summer. I had to Google it, and that was back when Google was like, just started out. So I Googled it, and I was like, oh, it's Harvard. I'm going to Harvard for the summer. I was telling my friends, and my mom was all excited. And so I, kind of got the idea that, if I would go to Harvard and do well at Harvard for the summer, then maybe I should apply to the best programs that I could get into. So I applied to probably the 10 toughest clinical psychology programs, graduate programs around. And the person who was writing my recommendation letter, she said, hey, you do know that these are the most competitive programs in the nation. I mean, your work is good, but I just need you to know this. Because at the time, and probably still true, getting into a clinical psych program is, probably as competitive or more competitive than getting into medical school. So I didn't care. Oh yeah, sure, whatever. I went to Harvard, so I'm gonna apply anyway. So I bet you can guess what happened after that. So I don't need to tell you, but I'll tell you anyway. So I started getting rejection letters, boop, 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 one after the other, all 10, probably within 2 or 3 weeks. And so every letter that I got stung. It was, ooh, okay, I have 9 left. Ooh, I have 8 left. Oh, no, down to 5. This last one has to work. And it didn't. So, by then I was a bad chick. I wasn't shaving. I was doing a lot of sleeping. And this was senior year of college. We're supposed to be having fun. Classes are almost done. I wasn't hanging out with people, and I told my advisor what happened, and he was shocked, but then he said something crazy, like, well, you didn't get in this round, but you'll still go to graduate school. And I wasn't really prepared to hear that. I was like, I was already at, I'm gonna be a failure. So I didn't get into graduate school, that means I'm gonna be a failure. Now, the good news is that that's not really where the story ended. So, here's what happened, I can talk about it later. But anyway, my point is that with an irrational worry, there's a tendency to overlook important information that will help you see the situation in a different way, okay? Now, let me give you another example. So let's talk about rational fear. So rational fear, if irrational fear is about logic that's not based in reason, then rational fear is logic that is based in reason. So I have an example for you. There was a guy that I was working with. He was, say, mid-40s, early 50s. And he's been in the same job since graduation. That job was what he knew. And he was really good at it. But over time, the job just, it was too much for him. It was taking up so much of his time. He was not at home as much as he wanted to be. And he had this idea of changing careers. And so he was really worried at changing careers because it's risky. It's possible that you couldn't get a job or won't get hired, and all of those seemed like reasonable concerns. Changing careers at the age that he was is possibly reasonable concern. So rather than try to pump him up and say, "Oh, you can just do it," I thought we'd try a different tack here. So because the worry was rational, based on logic, it's possible that you couldn't just switch careers at this age and stage in your life. I had to perform a little experiment. I said, so because you are emotionally invested in this idea that this just has to happen for you right now, why don't we perform a little experiment? So what I'd like you to do is contact the hiring managers for some of these jobs that you're interested in and just ask them a few questions. Ask them, what are the skills required for the job? What are the training opportunities? And let's just collect some information and see what happens. So he made some calls, some emails. Some people returned the calls, and some people didn't. But what happened was he found out that after talking to these hiring managers that he had most of the experience needed to just jump over into a completely different career. And so so the instructions were for him to get the information and report back to me. But he just applied right there on the spot and ended up getting another job where his concern about not being able to, but having to start over financially and having to learn new things. Well, he didn't have to learn new things, but they had a training program, and he already had most of what he needed to know anyway. So it was just that little bit extra. So he comes back and tells me, so I have to pretend like I'm disappointed in him because he didn't do exactly what I told him to do. But I had a suspicion that that's what was going to happen, because when you're not emotionally invested in it in that way, it's possible for you to see it a different way. So he was in the role of the experimenter, and he was able to take action, and as it turned out, he was able to come to the conclusion that it was possible for him to change careers at the age that he was. So that's rational fear. So I want to talk about, so Susie mentioned that I use CBT as an approach, and I use that professionally and practically. When I learned about cognitive behavioral therapy or cognitive behavioral theory in graduate school, I was really kind of taken away by it because of how practical and simple it is to apply. And so, when I learned it, we're talking about using it for clinical populations, and so the application is, in some cases, it's very technical, and sometimes it takes much longer than it would be for a person who's, not considered mentally ill or, any kind of psychotherapy treatment. But after learning about it, it's something that I began to just accept personally and apply to my everyday life. And so that's the part that I want to share with you here. So cognitive behavioral theory is about, well, this is the basic idea here. So you have beliefs, you have emotions, and you have behaviors. And they all affect each other. So you can tell here the arrows are double-sided, meaning that beliefs, okay, what you believe influences what you feel, and vice versa. What you believe influences what you do, vice versa, and emotions influence what you believe and what you do. And so the idea here is that if you can change or manipulate one of these, then the way the entire system works changes, okay? Now, you can't directly manipulate an emotion. It's like I feel sad today, so somewhere in my body I'm going to manipulate that, and now I feel good. It doesn't exactly work that way. But you can manipulate a belief. You can manipulate it by changing it, by challenging it. And you can manipulate a behavior by doing something different. So, oops, I forgot to use my microphone. So the main goal here is to change what you believe or how you think, and that is the mechanism for change. And there are two ways to do that: by changing or challenging a belief itself, or performing a new behavior and then evaluating the results of that behavior change. So the evaluation creates an interpretation of what that behavior change means. Okay? So you can change a belief by either changing the belief, challenging it, or changing the behavior. Okay? Now, does that make sense? Simple logic, right? So why don't people do this already? Two reasons come to mind. Well, most people don't know that you can do that, and such a system or way of thinking exists. But the second reason is you have to kind of think to do this. You have to be, a person who reflects on what you think about it, what you do, and understand the connection between all of these things. So if you're able to do that, you're able to sit and pay attention and think about, or what we call metacognition, or thinking about thinking. Think about what you're thinking about, then you can get a better sense of how that belief can be influencing what you're doing and getting in the way of where you want to go. Okay, does that make sense? All right. Now, let me give you an example of how this works. All right. So let's say you want to write a bestseller for the New York Times, and you're for whatever reason, you're just not doing it. You're not working on it. Your behaviors are, you're just avoiding it. You're not talking about it. Or you're talking about it. You're telling everybody, I'm going to write a New York bestseller for the New York Times. But you're not doing anything. You're not producing writing samples. You're not critiquing your work. You're not letting people read your work to get it critiqued. Just not really doing anything. What might explain why a person who wants to write a New York Times bestseller, what might explain why they're not doing it?
Scared of failing.
Scared of failing? Okay. Who else? I guess.
Afraid of what people might think about
Afraid.
what they do.
Afraid of what people might think. Those are all, yeah, go ahead.
They don't know where to start.
Don't know where to start. That's a good, and the good news is that one has a very practical solution. Okay, this last one over here.
Having trouble thinking.
Having trouble thinking?
Yeah.
Yep. All these are reasons. And so the idea here is that if you're not doing something, then there's a belief, there's an idea that's getting in the way of you taking the action. And that can be remedied by changing the belief or performing a different behavior. Okay? Let's go now to what I've kind of put together based off of some of the basic tenets, premises of CBT. What I call the 5W blitz. Okay? So it's a a series of questions, ways to identify some of the beliefs and behaviors that you're currently performing, and finding ways to challenge them and perform alternative behaviors to get to the goal that you want. So the first, well, I'll list them out and then I'll explain the piece of them. So the wants, the worries, wrong thoughts, what can I do, and what actually happens. So the 5 W's are all the everything starts with W, okay? So let's start with the wants. So this is where you try to identify the specific goal. What is it that you are trying to accomplish or want to accomplish? Now, this is the most important step because a lot of people don't know what they want. They can't put it into words. It's a very vague, idea. Like, I want to be healthy. And there's nothing wrong with being healthy, but perhaps you're not getting there because it's not defined clearly enough. So what exactly is healthy? Is that a number on a scale? Is that a heart rate or blood pressure? Or is there a number, an objective piece of information that you can tie to it to be able to say, this equals healthy? So what is it that you're trying to do? When do you want to have it completed? If you have a sense of when you want something completed, then you're much more likely to put in place a plan for that to happen. And how will you know when you've done it? So for goals that are less specific, so my example of being healthy, and other people will say, I just want to be wealthy, and that's the same idea. Like, how will you know when you're quote unquote wealthy? First, identifying those things and getting those clear. Then we go to worries. This is where you identify what is the specific worry. What is the idea in your head the moment that you think about whatever the goal is, the idea that produces all the physical discomfort, the shakes, the butterflies in your stomach, like what's the idea that's the closest connected to that? That's what you want to get in there. And so what will happen if it's true, if what you're worried about is likely to happen or is happening? What's the worst that will happen? So once you've This is a way to take the worry to the next degree. And so this is for the example that I gave of the person worrying that they're going to become a failure. This is how we got to that. So what is the worry? It started with, I don't know the material and I'm going to not do well on the exam. And ultimately, the anxiety they were experiencing was about failure and not specifically about the exam. Wrong thoughts. So this is where you want to challenge the wrong thoughts. So how likely is the worst will happen? Is this a rational thought, is the question. And if it is rational, what do you have to do to make it less likely to happen? Okay, and if it is rational, what are the chances that it actually happens? What can I do is the behavior change part. And now that you've articulated what the worries are, you know ways that they can be challenged, is there something that you can do to make it less likely to be true? If you're worried, go ahead.
I didn't get all the stuff in the rock.
Okay, I'll go back at the end. I just want to make sure we get it through at the end. Yeah, you can. We'll have a question and answer at the end. I should have probably said that. We'll have a question and answer at the end, and I'll bring this all over for you. So what is the action that you can do to make that worry less true? In the example of the person who doesn't understand the course material, well, what could they do? They could study. This seems like the most obvious answer, but I've been there too. It's like, I don't understand this. Did you study? Not a whole lot, but you can get some help. Get someone to help you. If it's true, what can you do to make the worry untrue? What do you need to do differently? So this is where you have to be very in touch with what the worry is exactly. And if it's rational, then more than likely the only thing you can do about it is change your behavior. And in so doing, that will change whether you believe it's likely to happen. Okay? What happened is everything that happens after you change the thought or you perform a new behavior. And so this is important to do because it essentially gives you a way to look at some of the patterns that you have. So most of the time, the things that we're anxious about tend to happen in patterns. And so if you can change a thought or change a behavior and you're successful at it once, all you have to really do is follow the same pattern the next time. Not necessarily anxiety, but sometimes you're not able to really avoid that. But if you're able to adopt the changed thought that you had before, or that new behavior, then you can shorten the amount of time that you experience that discomfort, or that sense of not being able to get to where you want to get to. Okay? For people, so this is the way that I've adapted here. You don't have to use a grid. I like to use a grid because you can put everything next to each other, and you read from left to right, and you can see what affects what.
And I just want to make sure everybody who doesn't have a handout, which includes some of
this is on your handout.
Raise your hand.
Okay, so we'll make sure you get those, and I'll keep talking while you get those. It's right there at the bottom. Yeah, that right there. Yeah. So, but it gives you a sense, and you can write your own, and make it in a journal, or scratch a piece of paper if you need to do something in that moment. But this just gives you a way to organize. Now, we're going to tell another story here and talk about so I did this for myself to give you an example of how to actually use it, or how to fill in the columns. So, I don't think Susie said it. So I've been in private practice since, it's April 2015. So it'll be 3 years soon. April 1st will be 3 years. And right before I started private practice, I came off of probably the biggest failure that I had ever experienced up to this point. So back then, I was working in a group practice as a psychologist, newly licensed, but I was always thinking about the financial markets. I wanted to be a trader. I almost considered just leaving psychology altogether, changing careers. I wasn't, exactly old, so I felt pretty good that I could do it. But every day I was thinking about the markets, coming to trading strategies, and while I'm at work, between patients, like seeing what the markets are doing, and I was just into it. And my wife said, okay, if you really want to do it, then we'll put a little money in the account, and you can start trading and see where it goes. I was like, great. So I got the opportunity. I, had my strategies. I was ready to go. I started to get serious, and I hit submit to send the order, and then it got serious. I mean, it you put some words around, or letters around that. Over the course, I would say, of about 3 weeks, the account just dropped. It's like it was like hemorrhaging money. Like every single day, I would log in. I was like, oh no, not again, not again. $30,000 just gone, like in 3 weeks, bro. And it was. Yeah, so I had to go home, and I would go home and put on the cheery face, like it's still gonna work out. Wife would ask, how's it going? I was like, yeah, it's going. And by the time I was down 30, I had to just tap out. So everything wore out. I had to go home and tell my wife this, and said, hey, this is what happened. And I wanted to ball up into a little ball and never come out. I don't know where I was, probably like ball up in a corner or something and never come out. And I believe that because I had worked so hard on it, I put in the time. It's not like I could say that I was taking shortcuts. Like I probably, worked on it for like a good year and a half. And then I started to get more serious as I started to believe that I could do it. And the other part of the story, so that happened. At the same time, I was thinking, well, I could do this, but being in a group isn't really working out so well for me either. I think I want to do a private practice. And so the losing the money in the market happened right about the same time that I was having a conversation with my wife about going into private practice. And I was thinking, maybe I'll fail at that too. I failed as a trader. Maybe I should just sit tight. And so that was happening in the background, and it took me probably a good 4 weeks. I was, doing a little bit of piece of paperwork here and there, and kind of worked on a marketing plan, but not really. And so I dragged my feet for about 4 weeks. And so my wife, she saw what was going on. She said, "Hey, how long have you been doing this?" She wasn't talking about like my moping around. She saw that pretty clearly. But she was, "How long have you been in the field, providing psychotherapy service? How long have you been?" So she made me answer that. And I was like, well, up at this point, I would say 10 years. She said, you know this industry. Everything that you don't know, you can just go figure it out. That's what you do with everything else. You figured out how to change the oil, you figured out how to make, pasta from scratch. And I said, I was like, you know what? That's actually true. I did figure out that pasta. Well, no, I mean, I'm joking. But at that point, I did have a lot of experience. And I had mentors that were in private practice. And I had, friends who had just started private practice, and they were doing well. And it turns out that in my group practice, I actually knew quite a bit. The thing that I was worried the most about was billing insurance. But then, guess what? There's YouTube and books and like people you can ask. And so she made me answer that question. I started to ask other people, and within days, the whole idea that I wouldn't be successful in private practice just kind of started to melt away because things started happening. I started to complete the steps. I posted an ad to start. I think I probably posted the ad, probably about a month before. Within 2 days, I was getting phone calls of people who wanted to start. And I tell them, I said, hey, listen, I don't have an office set up yet. We're not going to start until, 3 weeks from now. They said, okay, that's fine. Yeah, I'll see you in 3 weeks. How could you continue to believe that you would fail when that kind of thing is happening to you? It defies all logic for you to be able to hold on to that. That's the story behind this blitz. So I just wanted to tell that to give you some context and then just fill in the pieces for you. The want at the time was to start a private practice, and I was worried that I would fail because I failed at trading. I worried that people wouldn't want to work with me, and I didn't know how to bill insurance. Those were the main worries. And so when my wife asked me how long I'd been doing it, I said, okay, since 2005, so it's been about 10 years. I have mentors. I can learn what I need to know. I do that for everything else, every single thing. So that's what I did. I asked for help. I got some book recommendations, read books. I even asked clients beforehand. I said, hey, I'm thinking about leaving here, starting a private practice somewhere in Boston. And I would say, what do you think? So, oh yeah, I'll go with you. So it's kind of hard to be worried that people won't work with you when the people that you're currently working with will follow you. Kind of hard. So I met with people, got book recommendations. People were open enough to say, this is how I run my private practice. You can just do that. I said, okay, great. I'll try it out and see if it works for me. So I did what they did, changed some things to fit me and how I like to operate. And in about a week or so, I'll celebrate 3 years being in private practice because I was able to go through this process. So that's my example. I got another example that might, I don't know if anybody in here wants to study English literature, but anybody? Okay, well. Insert whatever major you have in mind in that column. So this is from someone that I was working with, and they wanted to study English literature. They're really anxious about it, and their worries were that if they would choose the wrong field of study, that they won't find a job, that their parents would be disappointed. She came from a family where there were lots of physicians in the family, so medicine is what you had to do. But she didn't want to do that. That's not where her heart was. She was worried that she was going to fail in her field, and that she wouldn't. And at the same time, she was working, to support herself a little bit. So she was worried that she would not be able to keep up with her schoolwork and her job. So we went through these questions, and I don't get to know the full story because I only was with her for a short period of time. But what I can tell you, after going through these questions, trying to help her identify like what would make this the wrong field, or where's the proof that you won't get a job, she started to ask people. She started to go to career services, get lots of support, and in the end, she spoke to her parents about it. She was upfront and said, "Hey, I don't really want to do medicine," and they were disappointed, as she expected, but not as disappointed. They didn't disown her or say, you're not a part of the family anymore. They said, well, if that's what you want to do, we will support you. still think you should do medicine, but we'll support you. So she was able to do that, and she got a different job that was much lower stress and was able to be more flexible with her schedule. So in that moment, she was able to manage that anxiety in a much better way. The other parts that she was anxious about or that she was worried about, I don't have information about that because of the amount of time that I was working with her. But going through this process helped her to be able to get past her anxiety anymore. Okay? Now, I had one more example. This was more for people who are not students. Anybody who's not a student? Okay, so I'll go through it quickly. I know we're going to run out of time here. So I was working with a person. She wanted better work-life balance. She wanted to be more at home with her family and have more self-care. And so what she was worried about was if she did that, if she was home more and doing more self-care, I think she was mostly talking about exercising, that she wouldn't seem professional because that would mean she would have to be away from work more. And so in her work culture, if you had to be in the office, be seen in the office, and those are the people that got promoted. I think she was a lawyer. Yeah, lawyer. So won't seem professional, won't advance in my career, and something will get missed. So if I'm not in the office to take this important call from this important client, then that's going to get passed on to somebody else, and then I'll get passed over for making partner. So those are the worries that she had. And so what we did was let's look for the evidence that people will see you in a negative light. Are there any good examples of people in your firm that have good work-life balance? If they're not in the office all the time, if they actually work out, they go to spin class during the day, during the work day, and they make it home at a reasonable hour. She was able to identify a few people. And so what I had her do was go and talk to those people to find out exactly what that process was for them. And, did they experience being seen as not professional? And it turns out that there was a little bit of truth to what she was worried about. The way she thought it would affect her negatively was way overblown. So she started with, doing 1 hour, 1 week to see if, to test whether she would actually miss something. And she tried to make it the same time every week, put on her calendar that I would be out of the office from this time, and people just didn't call her at that time. And so when she was back in the office, then they gave her the work. But she needed to go through this, process to be able to think about how she can approach her work-life balance in a different way and still have everything that she wanted for her career. So that's essentially how it works. And I think at this point you have, I've given it to you, I've explained it, given you a little grid. It's not super fancy, so you don't have to worry about that. But at this moment, this is a tool that you could use to get past any obstacle, any uncertainty that you're having right now. So as a student, if you're still trying to figure out what you want to do with your life, what's the meaning of life, all those kinds of things, this is something that will help you identify what those worries are and be able to change those or change your behavior so that you continue moving forward. And the same is true for anybody who's not a student. If you're point where you are in your life or your career, if it's not what you wanted for this point in time in your career, then this is something that could help you first identify what it is that you want and then move in a direction of having it. Okay, thank you. For the question portion.